This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
Welcome to What's News Dunedin, brought to you by Hazur Kebab, the radio show that spawned from the 19,000 plus strong local Otipo Dunedin What's News Dunedin Facebook group. The group has been putting the social back into social media since 2020 with respectful adult debate and a sense of humour. I'm your host Richard Knights. On today's show we'll be talking to our wonderful guest Damien O'Connor, Labour MP, who'll be telling us a bit more about themselves and what they do, as well as helping us look back over the posts that have generated the most interactions in the last 7 days on the What's News Dunedin Facebook group. Those posts this week will be the peaceful protest last week that closed ANZ Bank for the day, the unprecedented expulsion of Chloe Swarbrick from Parliament for calling the government spineless, and the disgusting shooting of 3 New Zealand sea lions. Welcome to the show, Damien.
Kia ora. Yeah, good to be here, Richard.
Fantastic. Now, if you, I don't know if you follow the show, follow my group, but we have a Pun Day Monday on the group, right? So we have bring a pun of the week, right? Yep. So and that whoever gets the most laugh reacts on that post gets their pun brought onto the show on a Friday. So we see if it kind of comes off the page and into, the spoken word. So our pun of the week this week is, there's 2 men sitting in a kayak and they were chilly. So they lit a fire in the craft. Unsurprisingly, it sank, proving once again that you can't have your kayak and heat it too. See, it makes the jump, which is what it's all about. So let's start the show off with a little bit of fun. Now, also what we do here, again, we have 3 pop questions for you, right? So these are 3 questions that I personally have designed that get basically under the skin of every single guest that comes on the show, right? Yeah. So we had a psychologist on once who decided that unofficially they were deep cutting, they got right there to the soul of the person.
I look forward to it. Yeah.
So first question.
Yes.
Cream teas. You've got a scone, you've got jam, you've got cream.
Yep.
What goes first on the scone, the jam or the cream?
Oh, the jam, always.
Awesome.
Always.
I like it when people start with confidence on that, and then when they come out and they go, "Oh, definitely cream."
Well, you've got to put butter on there first. Actually,
absolutely.
I mean, decadence.
Absolutely, butter first. Yeah. But then, when people come with that confidence and then they give the wrong answer, which would be cream, it sets the show off on a bit of a tilt for the rest of the rest.
I appreciate the butter thing is a bit difficult at the moment given the price of it, but we should always start with butter.
Butter, jam, cream. Job done. That's it. That's the only question you can get wrong on this show, Damien. So everything from now on.
Tick that one off.
Yeah,
life was that easy.
Well, that's why I like to get it out of the way first, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of know what the tone of the show is going to be for the rest of the duration. So, second question: just because you can't get it wrong doesn't mean it's not important, right? Yeah. Who is your favourite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?
I can't name one of them. How bad is that?
Oh, they're all Renaissance painters. So you've got Raphael, Leonardo, Donatello, and Michelangelo, and then you've got the giant rat, Master Splinter.
I would say Leonardo. It's a good sounding one.
There's no wrong answers with the turtles, right?
I'll say Leonardo. And I better go and find out, what are the particular attributes of
they just fight and eat pizza.
Do they?
Yeah, that's the best thing about turtles. Fighting, pizza.
I guess, and then I saw on the radio this morning that all those little turtles and the things in the Pacific, they've all got little bits of plastic in them.
Oh, I know.
It's terrible.
It's the whole microplastic thing. That's a show in itself, I tell you.
It is.
Now, third and final question, and this one's a thinker, so give it some thought. Would you rather never be able to go out during the day or never be able to go out during the night? And we'll define
never
those.
Never to be able to go out during the night.
Night. So
I like sunlight.
Yeah, you're not a nighttime person.
Oh, well.
But you're not allowed to go out. I mean, you can still be awake, can't you? Obviously, no one says you've got to go to bed. But
no, you've got to go out in the day, see the vitamin D, get out and see the world. Nighttime's great, but it's you can do a bit of sleeping and rest up and think.
I think I'd be the same actually, because like nighttime for me is kind of over by 9:30, and I'm sound asleep in bed. So at my age, that's what happens. So
lucky you.
I know, right? And then during the day is that if I didn't go out during the day, I'd literally have like an hour and a half to get out at night, and then I'd be sound asleep. So
some of my best thinking is 2:00 in the morning. Well, that's what you think actually, but when on reflection you realise it's not your best thinking at 2:00 in the morning. But that's what happens. Are
you someone like me who if you wake up in the middle of the night with stuff on your brain, that's it. You've got to get up and not write it down. I'm one of these people that if I wake up at night and I get something, I think I haven't done that, I've got to get up and do it. But my sort of OCD doesn't let me kind of go back to sleep.
Not quite that bad, but actually if you've got a notebook beside the bed, it's actually really good to write it down and you can kind of move on and go back to sleep.
Yeah, just don't make it a dream diary. I have some horrible dreams. I wouldn't put anything of that in writing.
No, don't ask questions about dreams.
No,
that would be going too far.
I get some serious night terrors, and like some of that stuff is like you wouldn't write that down. Stephen King would look at it and go, "Man, that's some messed up stuff."
Oh, that's creativity, you know.
Yeah, well,
give it to someone now.
I don't think I am creative genuinely, but my dreams are pretty creative, or they can be. They're pretty bloody scary sometimes.
Well, given some of the games I see around the place, those ideas are turned into money-making ventures by lots of smart kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about the 3 topics of the week now, and then we'll come on a bit later on the show to talk about your good self and all the stuff about you. First thing was we had actually had Rosemary Penwarden on the show last week, and she'd actually come from this protest at the ANZ Bank because they were protesting the fact that they finance Bathurst and the coal mining. They're trying to do that at the moment, and they've got some people up in a buckets, buckets up in the air to stop the coal being moved from one side to the other. But they were closing down ANZ. Or protesting ANZ Bank last week. So across the country, around the Motu, there were a number of protests, peaceful protests, where basically the people just sat or stood outside the bank in an attempt. And the banks knew about this for a long, long time. So I because I spend a lot of time on social media, I also see a lot of the comments that come through. Now, I've had a lot of people on the show. Rosemary was one of them, and I went straight from here and I went down to see what the protest was all about because we were talking about it on the show itself. And it was peaceful. It was, people sitting around, people from all ages, from all walks of life, from priests to students to people, corporate people who've taken time off work. Protesting the fact that, we've got banks that are still sort of financing the destruction of our natural environment, ultimately, which is what it comes back to. Now, there's an argument that says, well, we still need a place for coal. I get that some of that argument. I do. I'm not
unfamiliar with these discussions, but carry on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But it's one of those things. Was that one of the things that I saw on social media that I kind of wanted to bring up about that was the notion of peaceful protest.
Yes.
Because in my mind, peaceful protest is protest where you're noticed, where you don't resort to violence, you don't resort to any nastiness or illegality of what you're doing, but there is inconvenience, right? There is, people will be put out by that, right? A lot of the comments I was seeing from the people that were against what was, were kind of like, I support your protest, I just don't support the way you've done it. You don't put anyone out, and you kind of think. To me, I'm thinking, how's that protest?
Unrealistic. Look. I think peaceful protest is part of basic democracy, and we've seen it around the world. It started as peaceful. Unfortunately, some of it doesn't end up that way. But the ability to do that is a core part of who we are. People are frustrated sometimes. They don't know how they speak out. They might send an email or send a letter or whatever it was in the past. Actually coming together as a group and peacefully protesting, I think is fine. I mean, I've seen a lot of it over the years. As West Coast Tasman MP, over all sorts of issues, closing down mines, opening them up, all of this, logging, the whole lot, and now it's moving on. And I just read an article today saying that, some of the KiwiSaver funds that we invest are going into arms manufacture. That's a really concerning one. So sometimes the protests are somewhat erratic. We do it to one and not to another, or to some investment companies or not others. So I guess as long as they're peaceful and they have purpose, then there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was an unfortunate incident where where the police kind of surged at one point and a person fell over, not necessarily knocked over, but kind of, and that straight away that was aimed at the protest, right? And whilst you kind of say, well, if the protest wasn't there, then none of that would have happened. That's not the intention, and it was actually the police trying to manoeuvre people out of the way that caused the incident. And you kind of go, both sides, at least the police have to take some.
I think we're pretty lucky here. You see police overreach, overreaction elsewhere around the world. I think most of our police here are very, very good. And,
I think the same.
But inevitably, if you have a gathering of people, it doesn't matter where, you're going to have some incident, either by accident or by mistake. And so, I think we shouldn't get too worried about that. Like this, the principle of being able to speak out, to express ourselves individually or collectively, that's really important. But we've all got to take responsibility to ensure that we minimise the harm and that it's for a purpose that delivers on that message, not a whole lot of other things that people, and there are people who go around just want to stir up stuff for their own reasons, just seize on those opportunities. We try and prevent those people creeping into some of those legitimate protests.
Yes, and it's interesting actually that when I was there, I do a bit of protesting. I certainly support a lot of the protests that are going around, and certainly stood up against the hospital rebuild, and when Christopher Luxon's been in town a couple of times, even to the point of organising protests to go and confront them, which they interestingly ran away from quite cowardly in my mind, but. One of the things that I didn't realise was actually a lot of the guys that were there actually go through a bit of they give an induction. They actually give like a peaceful protest training.
These are the police you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the actual protesters themselves.
Right.
They actually take it on themselves to make sure that the people that they're protecting their people too, which I didn't realise. I just thought it was a whole bunch of people just turn up.
There's a whole lot of dynamics around crowds, and I remember being at a protest on the West Coast back in the 90s where where crowds get to a certain point where if they take on a level of energy and kind of focus, that they can kind of get out of control, and so both from the protesters' side and from the police side, it's best if that doesn't happen, because that gets really messy. And so again, we're learning more about the science of everything these days. So if we can have peaceful protests, but have better organisation of it, and because I know the police will be getting trained in this area to ensure that they can maintain law and order, but not overstep. Well, that's what we always hope for anyway, and most of the time they don't.
No, we're lucky, because in the process I've attended, I've always been very impressed by the police presence, like genuinely.
We should not take any of that for granted. We are so lucky to have a police force that is run ethically. It's run for the population, for the community. That's not the case, in many places around the world.
Just go and look at the States and the stuff that's going on over there at the moment, and with them bringing National Guard in to to help police and things, and you just look at that and go, like, what a scary part of the world that would be to. Well,
that's where you can have manipulation by politicians for their own purposes, and that's what we've got to, we cannot allow that to creep in to our country. We're seeing a little bit of that, in my view. But the democracy that we've taken for granted, we're nice people, we're kind people generally, we trust the systems. Yep. We can't take any of that for granted.
No, absolutely agree. So talking about our systems, topic number 2 was the expulsion of Chloe Swarbrick from Parliament this week for standing up and calling the government, or certainly the other side of the government, spineless. I believe my research this week tells me that she's in good company for getting expelled from Parliament this week, because I believe you may have been expelled yourself.
Yes, well, it should be an emotional debate. Anyone who sees any of those images from Gaza or from the West Bank should be outraged.
Absolutely.
It's not the humanity that our ancestors in this country, fought for literally on the battlefields and have worked so hard for. It's one where, freedom of expression, of protecting human rights, and just the basics of humanity, and we see that being destroyed literally on an hourly basis over there, people being killed and starved and so there was a debate. Labor called for a debate on why it's such a minimalist thing to just recognise the state of Palestine. This is wasn't even demanding a ceasefire, which the government's made kind of meek,
or even bringing sanctions. It
was just actually recognition of Palestine, and so we had a couple of speeches, and Winston was dancing on the head of a pin, and so I just called him gutless, and so the Speaker intervened and said, well, withdraw and apologise or leave the House, and so I chose to leave the House. And then Chloe spoke after that, I guess, and her what she said there is, if there were 6, I think, government ministers who had a spine, and that again, the speaker intervened and overreacted. In my view, the week-long ejection from Parliament was an overreaction.
That's what I mean about the unprecedented thing. It just seemed, your expulsion and her expulsion were primarily for the same.
Yeah, there's a process in Parliament where she said no, I won't withdraw and apologise. He hadn't, and I haven't gone back to the transcript to say, or you can leave the House, which was the option he gave me. Yeah. And so I chose to leave the House. Yeah. So I didn't defy the Speaker. So when you defy the Speaker, then that's a slightly hot. Yes, it is. And and then, normally, yes, she would have been ejected from the House, but for the length of period, for the week, that's far too long for what was, it's a debatable call on, how people express themselves. Yep. You're not allowed to call someone a hypocrite, but you can say there's hypocrisy. Yes. In policy or in the way that government operates.
You can't call someone a liar, right? And I get that absolutely. Yeah. But you can say that they're not necessarily playing with all the facts and things like that. There's a way about doing it. Yeah,
I mean, as any lawyer will know, the wording is quite critical, and as parliamentarians know that the wording and how you say it, and as I say, on balance, I think that the Speaker overreacted with the length of period that she's been ejected from the House from it.
So, and interestingly, even Winston Peters thought he overreacted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Winston knows how to stretch the rules of the House, but he knows the rules of the House too. And I thought that was a very fair, intervention by him to say that it was reasonable. I mean, we have to have robust debate in the House, of course. And and from time to time you might overstep or use the wrong word, and then there are rules. There are books with rules of Parliament. I point this out to all the school kids that come in, and I say, if you think school's bad, you want to come here and see all the rules that we have to abide by, and they're necessary. So we need protocol and standing orders in the House, but it should be robust. Yep. We represent 5.5 million people, and all their views and aspirations. There's 123 of us, I think. Come together.
Yes, I believe so.
And of course, in representing their views and aspirations, there should be tension, respectful tension. I was lucky; I was brought up in a family where debate was regular. But respectful debate. You have that debate, but then you move on and you respect one another's different views. Yep. There'll be people in the House who you might not like as much, but most of them have come to the House for the right reasons. They had their own philosophy and their views on how New Zealand should move ahead and how it should, what we should be trying to achieve. I disagree with many of them. Most of them over on, not all of them on the government, but there'll be some where I know their values align. They've just simply got a different political angle on it.
Yeah, no, and I get that. And it's one of the things actually that What's News Dunedin as a Facebook group is built on, that the ability to have robust conversation and debate within the set of rules that I've set down like 5.5 years ago, in order to make sure that conversation can be strong but not nasty. And
I guess within community, there's an accountability which is great. When you go onto the wider platforms, Facebook, where just someone can post it up and they can use their name or not, yep. and make wild accusations. That lack of accountability leads to extremism. And yes. I think if you can generate that debate within a community, like a Facebook page like that, or a platform, that's good and healthy. But again, it should end with respect for those views.
Absolutely.
But there are some extreme views where I'm just horrified, and in fact I believe within the coalition government at the moment there's an agenda of divide and rule. You create these divisions. Yep. And then you can kind of walk through and continue on with your own wider agenda.
And I see a lot with ACT is one of the things that I see, and I saw it this week as well, because like you've got David Seymour standing up and talking about the fact that Chloe had taken off her Palestinian scarf and put it on the side of her, put it down, because you must get warm. It's like we're having a jumpy. Like, take your jumper, your coat off. I've taken my jacket off to sit down here. I don't always wear my suit jacket. But they'd taken the scarf, and then he was trying to get that ejected from that, and you're kind of going, we're not focusing on the right issue at this point.
No, I mean, and the coalition government and for ACT in particular, they're run by an international right wing agenda. Atlas Group have and David Seymour's denied being part of that or being connected to it, which is strange, really, given that there's clear proof he has been. They have an international agenda, and it is about divide and rule, and that is very destructive for democracy, and particularly for countries like ours that are generally quite trusting and have trusting systems and kind of general assumption of integrity.
Yeah.
We've got to keep checking those systems.
I think that's kind of one of those things. It's like when I look at what they're trying to do around electoral reform, I don't think that you should be able to change those electoral rules without complete cross-party support, with every single party in government actually going, not per voter, but literally every party going, we're happy with that. Because why should you be able to change something to benefit yourself as the government in power?
There are different cohorts of voters and different capabilities and understanding, and the ability to get to the polling booth on the day means that we've got to be a bit more flexible. Which is early voting's been brought in, online not yet. But the point is around the shutting down the ability to enrol on the day just makes it harder for people whose lives are really busy, who suddenly realise that there's an election on and want to go down and participate,
yep.
and they get shut out. That simply limits democracy, and that's gerrymandering, and that should not be allowed to occur.
No, that's the thing for me. So, third topic of the week, and this is one real close to home for me because the New Zealand sea lion is the reason I'm in New Zealand. Right? I saw a picture of a New Zealand sea lion. My brother sent me a picture of a New Zealand sea lion and his boy on a beach down past Tari Mouth, and that was the day that me and my wife said we want some of that for our kids. Right? So I've got an affinity to the New Zealand sea lion, but there's been 3 shot this week up in Waitaki, right? Yeah. And down in Clutha there was 2 shot. Now, I'm not against like killing animals. I don't want to kill animals, but I can understand that you might kill a pest, or you might kill something that is causing damage or strife around. There's lots of reasons for culling or killing an animal. Shooting a sea lion, in my mind, is the lowest of the low. It's an animal that's not.
It's endangered.
It's endangered. They're not invasive. They are literally, they're the dogs of the sea. In the sense of like they are like puppies. There's nothing to hate about a sea lion, genuinely, right? And you've got people killing these taiga species, I just do not. My brain cannot compute the thought process that someone has to go through, because they're not even a fast moving animal, right? It's not like there's no sport in it. Like if you again, I would not recommend you do it, but if you shot a seagull out of the sky, at least you've shown some skill, right? Because at least it's flying around. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying do that, because I think seagulls are wonderful, but there's an animal lying there, not moving. Like, where's the sense in it?
The vast majority of people would find that quite horrifying, for the reasons you've just explained, and I guess it's an indication of the level of frustration or vandalism or the lack of respect that are kind of creeping into our society. And I've always said if people have got nothing to lose, then they'll do whatever. And that's the divisions that we have across wealth, assets, opportunity are such that, more and more New Zealanders are kind of losing touch or losing respect for the institutions that, we've always assumed are part of our society, good community, respect for one another, all of those things. And the same people who are going to shoot the sea lions or abuse animals, will be taking their frustration out on individuals as well, on human beings, and so there'll be a pattern there. We have to address that and ensure that people who have nothing or feel they have nothing can be brought back into our communities, because, as I say, if they're shut out feeling that way, then they'll just do whatever they like, because the consequences they don't care about. And so we've got to be an inclusive community and society, and we've got to ensure that there are opportunities for people. So, that's an outcome, I think, no excuse for what they've done. But it's an outcome, an indication of what we're starting to see. Just vandalism that we see from time to time, and there's always been a little bit of it, but I think it's kind of creeping in, along with growing homelessness, high levels of violence in some areas. domestic violence, the king hit legislation, that people are going out prepared to just king hit people. We're dealing with these things. They are increasing in frequency, and we have to ask the questions why. And I think it does come back to this, basically an economic structure where we have greater division, disparities of wealth, and until we address that, we're going to be struggling a little bit in some of these areas.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I hate the term king hit. I actually prefer coward punch as a description. It's like there's nothing regal about it, is there, to be completely fair?
I mean, and that's why we, in Labour, we're saying, you need a decent job so that you can afford to have a home and get access to reasonable healthcare. Like the kind of three basic things.
Yeah, exactly.
And a decent job is one where you're respected, it's safe, you get paid a fair amount for your efforts, and affordable homes is something that you don't have to spend 50, 60, 70% of your income on, leaving you with very little to take care of your kids. So and there's more of those kind of dilemmas. Either homelessness, unemployment, not being able to get access to healthcare, more of that creeping in, and that will lead to greater frustration, more outcomes that we're talking about, like just vandalism and destruction of wildlife and property.
Yeah, and I think the underlying thing is the things you talk about is you put those foundations in place. The country as a whole, society as a whole benefits straight off the back of that, in the sense that, like, if you've got people that are fed, housed, and looked after, then their direct input into society is stronger, greater, and bigger straight off the bat, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I had a job in the previous government as Minister of Corrections. Really challenging area. Some say a no-win one. I really enjoyed it because the opportunities to make progress were huge for individuals and for groups who came into prison, and for a whole lot of different reasons. But often they found that people, many who would get to mid-40s and might have family or whānau still outside, and there might be grandchildren or whatever, and they said, I've got something to focus on, and so I'm going to straighten out my life and move on. It's the purpose that is so important. And if people don't have purpose, and that does come with a job, but then a bit of security, which means somewhere to go and sleep at night and somewhere to look after your kids in, if you don't have that, you kind of have growing sense of destruction, self-destruction, and then that, being imposed on others around you or other things around you. And, we do have some big challenges across our society. Just talking about the economy and growth is just, it's kind of Neanderthal. It's the stuff that we talked about in the 1700s, 1800s, as if though this economic growth and more money is going to deliver for everyone. It's stupidity unless it's a complex society that we live in, that the challenges are complex, but so too are the solutions. And the current coalition governments of just growth is about as dumb and stupid as you can get. I mean, of course we want to grow, but that's not just about economic growth. It's not just about money. It's about knowledge. Yep. It's about sharing. It's about being able to help one another, and ensure that the systems we have get better. That's growth.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean just a whole lot more money, which is what the government talks of.
We're going to talk a lot more, I think, about the government. But before we do, I'm just going to get a quick word from our wonderful sponsor.
Have you checked out Hazur Kebab yet? It's your go-to for a delicious lunch, a tasty dinner, or anything in between. Order online to save time and pick up some delicious, authentic Turkish cuisine in just minutes. HazurKebabCafe.co.nz. Dine in or take away at 906 George Street.
Have you been to Hazur Kebab? No. Top end of George Street, opposite George Street Normal School. Fantastic. If you like a kebab, Damien, you cannot go wrong with going to see my mate. Go see my mate Mustafa. Tell him you know me. He'll always look after you. But there's some fantastic food, and it's cooked with love. And it's just genuinely, you can taste it. You can taste the love in the food.
There's always an occasion I need some good takeaway food.
Absolutely, yeah. So. I want to talk about you. Obviously, a Labour MP. Genuinely, I don't know that much about you. So what I'd like, if we could start...
No, you can believe anything I tell you then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll take your face value, mate. But what I'd like is maybe the 5-minute Cliff Notes version of Damien O'Connor, how you where you started, how you got into what you're doing, and a bit about what you've done up until today.
Yeah. I'll keep it short. Look, I grew up on the West Coast, small dairy farm really, and then didn't finish my degree at Lincoln, and then went to Australia for 5 years, came back to go farming, and then set up a small tourism business alongside the farm. So we adventured jet boating, rafting, horse trekking, doing stuff like that. So we built that up and eventually kind of moved from share milking into the full-time tourism. And then that was promoting the West Coast tourism industry back in the 80s. And so we needed to remind people where the West Coast was. This was even in Wellington. And so I realised that actually there was quite a lot of unemployment there. The reforms of the 80s were pretty hard on the West Coast, creating, business development companies and stuff. So I realised that actually you had to go to Wellington to make a real difference. And so I threw my name in the hat in 93, 92. I managed to get the nomination for the Labour Party. And I've been in Parliament since then. I lost the seat in 2008, and that was after we'd been in government, but came back in on the list. And I lost the seat I won it back again, 2011, but lost it again last year, or in 2023. And so I'm a Labour list MP now. So I've been in Parliament a long time, but I've never disconnected from the realities of farming. Always managed to be able to get out and do a bit on the land. And tourism, those are still my passions, I guess, my background. But it is around regional development, which is part of the portfolio I have now, trade. And so I guess lucky enough to be given a job as Trade Minister to go and negotiate a few deals, which was good. So I've been very fortunate to be a cabinet minister in 2 different Labour governments, through some challenging times. And so you learn a lot. I'm still there because I want to make a difference. And I guess there's still a place for some older, sometimes grumpier, more mature blokes from the West Coast where, a bit of pragmatism has to be injected into politics from time to time because, we have a lot of science around politics and a lot of people, even like David Seymour and who hasn't done much other than, be a policy person. And, and in all parties, there are people like that, done political science and law. But there is a reality to connect to people, what that means to them in their lives. And so as a contract fencer, as a raft guide, as a share milker, all of those things I've held on to as some experience to bring to the application of policy and the stuff that we do even around the cabinet table. So, I feel very, very lucky. Personal change in circumstances have meant that I'm now living down in Dunedin. And, that's I didn't think I'd ever be down here. My daughters, one or two of them were down here at university for a short time, but haven't spent much time, but I am now and learning about the place. So it's great. Life is an adventure. If you ride a motorbike, the philosophy is that it's the journey that's important, not necessarily the destination.
Yeah.
And so live every moment, learn and try and contribute.
So you've been a cabinet minister under 2 separate Labour governments. Which ones are those? Because I'm still trying to catch up with my
right. Yes,
because I only came in 2010, so I don't have a lot before John Key. If I'm honest.
No. Well, so Helen Clark, who you may have heard of her, she's still as I say, international elder. So these are people who have contributed. She went to UNDP after her job, but we won in 99, and then we were in government until 2008. Right. And so I kind of went through the ranks there through that 9-year period and ended up for the last 3 years as, Minister for Corrections, Minister for Tourism, Associate Minister for Agriculture. Had a few jobs there and in health. One of the things I look back on is I was Associate Minister of Health to take smoking out of bars. Right. Something that no one would have ever thought possible. But it was, it was a collaboration, of course, and the society had moved on to accept that. And so it wasn't very controversial at the time. And I think now, if you said to people, even anyone can smoke in the bar, they'd be outraged. Yeah, definitely. So things like that, take time and need to move forward. But, there are new challenges now, and with Jacinda Ardern, for that 6-year period, again, everything was thrown at us. It was a challenge, but we're very proud of what we did, particularly through COVID. And you go around the world, and people are amazed at what we were able to do. Yeah. The only people who don't appreciate it are the ones here in New Zealand, which is a bit sad.
That is crazy, because I genuinely, because of where I come from, I'm thankful that I lived where I lived at the time. I've had family that died, right? So I've got family that have passed in the UK because their reaction to the pandemic was appalling. I mean, they whatever they were looking after the pounds rather than looking after the people, and I could see it from here. And I was frightened every day, that I would lose another member of my whānau. And then I look at the stuff that we happened over here, and I'm eternally thankful. But then I look at the response that we're having, and the bit that really irks me, like genuinely really irks me, is the way that this current government are framing that response.
It's opportunism, and it's a destructive agenda around divide and rule, and they're going to scratch every itch, and that's what will happen over the next 18 months to try and divide us and make us angry and frustrated, and then try and come in with some very smart marketing to try and win the game again. And people who are really busy in their lives day to day often don't have time to think about the long-term implications. No. And that's what the government will be hoping for.
Yeah, and I'm noticing that right now, right? It seems to be diversion and distraction, to kind of hide away from the things that they're talking about. But one of the things that I'm frightened about is that I think that people have those short-term memories, right? So people, when they get to the election next year, will have forgotten about all the horrible things and all the regressive and all the racist policies that this government has tried to enact and has enacted in a number of spaces. Forget the fact that we've got the Treaty Principles Bill thing pushed out of the way. There's still the Regulatory Standards Bill. There's still a whole other legislation that we as a country are literally dragging ourselves as a nation back into the 1950s.
Well, they've just then want to stir up the seabed and foreshore. Really tricky issue that we've been kind of managing and getting through, and they want to stir that up as well. And so, last week we just had an amendment built in at the last minute so that, effluent effectively, dirty water could be then continue to pour out from, these are the Waikato farms, for another 10 years into streams, rather than have farmers, and I'm a farming advocate, rather than have them go through a consent process that wouldn't have said necessarily stop tomorrow, but it would have put some conditions on that said, well, look, can you improve the system here and there? And so all the good farmers who have spent millions of dollars across the country to improve their standards and deliver good water into the waterways and do the right thing, and then there's this other bunch that the government's changed legislation to allow them to continue to do the wrong thing. And that's kind of crazy. It's not to shut them down, but it is to give a clear signal that unless we sort these things out, we're going to hit a brick wall with either our own internal management of our environmental challenges, but also our international reputation.
I know, and it's so important. We've only got one planet. We've only got one country. We've only got those streams. If we pollute those streams, it's far more effort and money to fix those problems once they are as bad as they can ever be. Correct. Than it is to stop them becoming that way in the first instance.
Stitch in time saves 9, and I think the longer we kick these things down the road, and this is what the government's come in. They didn't have much policy when they came in. They just said we'll give tax cuts. Everything else was to take away some of the things that we'd implemented, and they did. That's what they did. They backtracked on pretty much everything.
It's been a very Americanized kind of couple of years, if that in the sense, because you've seen America where they get the Republicans get in, then the Democrats get in, and what they do is the Democrats will then spend 3 years out of 4 winding back what and then the same happens again. So you don't actually move forward very much. What you actually do is you just keep winding backwards the stuff that the other people did, and it feels that way. It feels much more that way this time round than it did when there was the last change as well, if that makes sense.
I mean, I was an MP under first past the post, and I think we needed a change. At that stage, it was like winner take all. So it was the tyranny of the majority. and then we moved to MMP, and we'd hoped that it would, and it certainly brought wider and better representation in Parliament, but the outcomes are a bit harder to assess, and we swing quite wildly. We've got the tyranny of the minority now, so you've got the minor parties, and unless the major party, and it was Labour in government when coalition with the Greens and New Zealand First, we had to ensure that the majority vote, which went to Labour, determined the agenda. And what we've seen in this last government is that the majority, what clearly voted for National, they've been undermined because they didn't hold the line and they let both New Zealand First and ACT to determine the agenda. And that's not, that MMP wasn't designed to do that. It was to moderate rather than to manage the agenda.
So why you as a person in Parliament, why do you think that's happened? Is that just weak leadership in National?
I mean, it was, yes. I mean, I guess I can't speak for the way that negotiations took place, but that's what they should have done, just taken longer to hold out. And, and depending on the proportional votes of each of the parties, that every time there'll be a negotiation, it will be a different set of circumstances. But holding the line on core principles by the major party is absolutely essential, and that's where National have caved in too often. And we're seeing, I'm not saying that they had the right agenda either. I mean, they had tax cuts. So all those tax cuts, the billions of dollars that they gave back, most of which people didn't notice.
I haven't noticed.
And so now, the failure in the healthcare system and education, all of those things that are being squeezed is because they had to pay for their tax cuts regime. It's ridiculous. They, in fact, their economic policy has been a failure. They screwed down everything, stopped all these projects. You watched the one here in Dunedin Hospital. So the tradies have packed their bags and gone to Australia, and the government said, let's slow down inflation because no one's got the money to spend. So inflation drops. And then we've got an economy that's not working. We've got increasing levels of unemployment, still got house unaffordability, and they've handed some of that government responsibility for housing development through Kāinga Ora. They've sold some of that land to private developers. Now, they may or may not deliver the kind of affordable homes that we need, but it's in the hands of the private sector now.
It's in the hands of the gods, isn't it? And they've got to turn a profit.
Of course they do, and that's fair enough. But the thing is, if we're trying to ensure there's a core level of affordable housing for people who need it, then that should be the focus, not a profit from a housing development, which is in the private sector's legitimate focus. But it shouldn't be the one of a government around social housing where we have since the 1930s taken some responsibility. The alternative is what we see on the streets, and that's people don't have anywhere to go.
And we're seeing more and more of that, aren't we? I mean,
absolutely.
Story in the paper today: a family been evicted. They're living in their car next to their belongings in a park.
It's look. We have in Auckland the prime example of that. We have a kind of a housing market with an economy tacked onto it. I mean, it's been said somewhat flippantly. That's the reality, and so. Economists or some people, and certainly the government, are hoping that house values won't diminish any more, that they'll start climbing so that people feel better in Auckland, as though that's going to help our economy and the vast majority of people. No, dreaming. Like people might feel that their house value has gone up and they're slightly better off, but actually long term that doesn't deliver for their children or their grandchildren going forward. And so we're in a bit of a merry-go-round of capital appreciation of house values and property investment, which is why we have a low productivity economy.
But I mean, since I got here 15 years ago, my house price has over doubled. I'm in real estate. I sell real estate as part of what I do, right?
Yep.
My house price has over doubled, but I can afford less at the supermarket than I could 15 years ago.
So the banks are running away with without kind of further putting the boot into the ANZ, but all of them have been running away with billions of dollars of profit because we, borrow as much as we can to buy a house, pay all the money back to the banks, and then what's left over we try and feed our kids and do whatever else we can. And so there is a need for a structural shift in our economy. This coalition government is not going to do that at all. You have areas, you've got Shane Jones running around trying to get some, growth in the regions, and some of that money is well spent. But, we've got to do, I'm not opposed to mining, but make sure we have environmental protection.
Yeah.
And when it comes to coal, well, it is on the way out. If we can come up with alternatives, then we're better off. Some of the coal used is for metallurgical purposes, to create the products that we need to make the transition. So we've got to accept that kind of that evolution.
Yeah.
But if we don't, we'll have a revolution.
Just using coal to create electricity, or just using coal to create heat, is.
Well, I think it's on the way out. There are better ways of doing that, and I think that there's, that's a whole complex challenge. Energy is essential for our lives, for our economy. John Key, effectively privatised our electricity system. These were state-owned enterprises. These were companies that the population, the taxpayer, owned, generating the vast majority of our renewable energy. And he effectively, sold 49%. Doesn't matter. They now have to be run as a publicly listed company to maximise their profits. And that is, they are screwing us in terms of electricity prices. They shrink the supply. They're the ones that have the consents to put in more generation, a lot of it renewable. They choose not to, so they can short the market and keep pushing the value of electricity up. That has to be addressed. That's one of many structural issues that we have across our economy that needs to change.
I want to come back to that in a second, but before we do, just another quick word from our wonderful sponsor.
Have you checked out Hazur Kebab yet? It's your go-to for a delicious lunch, a tasty dinner, or anything in between. Order online to save time and pick up some delicious, authentic Turkish cuisine in just minutes. HazurKebabCafe.co.nz. Dine in or take away at 906 George Street.
As a late arriver to New Zealand, I find it interesting that it was only John Key that privatised the electricity, because I've come from a place where the privatisation of those things happened under Maggie Thatcher and all those people, right? And it failed miserably. It's failed miserably. It's done exactly what's happening here, and it's pushed prices up and everything like that. They privatised water, they privatised gas, they privatised rail, they privatised the whole damn thing. And it's an experiment that has royally failed. I find it strange that as a country we've not looked at that and kind of gone, that's a bad idea, right? But we didn't, right?
No, well, what tends to, we're very open to international ideas and advice, and so we're also, say, a little bit naive and sometimes. So we've had people come down, it's been trialled and failed, and they've come down and said, well, let's try it somewhere else. And we have taken on board the theory and not looked at the practice and the outcomes all too often. And so, we had in the 90s a structural shift of the electricity sector. We owned the whole lot, of course, and then it was this idea that you have competition, you break it all up, and that again, had failed. And then now the view that privatisation might deliver better outcomes. And so it's been an evolution, but that's where I think we have an obligation to look at policies as proposed and see what the long-term outcome is likely to be. And people say, oh, you can't tell that. You can tell. You can rely on kind of commercial drivers, which are, pretty consistent in a capitalist system. You can rely on human nature. And you can say, so given opportunities that either business or individuals have, that's likely to be the direction of travel. If that's not what we want as a collective society, then we have a responsibility to adjust the proposals.
Yeah.
And people have a view that, everyone demands their rights and no one's taking their responsibilities. And we have a responsibility to one another to help us move forward. We don't have the right to take without contributing back. And that balance, I think, is out of step.
Is it easier to be in opposition?
No, it's a miserable life.
Because in my mind, I see not saying it's hard, easier work as such, but it's easier. You could say pretty much anything in opposition, and without necessarily having to.
You could do that,
yeah,
but no, not for a long time. Have you been able to look where you just spin a line or say what you think and then don't have to back it up? Usually that what goes around comes around,
yes,
and someone will remind you of that. Now you might be able to bulldoze your way through and say, oh, that's what I said then, and now I think differently. I mean, I guess if you have integrity and you want to be consistent. If you don't change your mind, you haven't got one, but you should do it for the right reasons.
The reason I'm asking is I'm specifically thinking about the hospital, and I'd be reticent not to talk about it as something I'm passionate about as much as anything else, right? National made these promises, build it as Labour were going to build it because Labour pulled some stuff back, right? So no one's innocent in all of this picture, right? As far as I'm concerned, right? But they got it on a promise, right? They then literally ran back on that promise and pushed it away and went, oh, we can't do this because it's Labour's fault. And that winds me up something rotten that 2 years on it's still Labour's fault because it's not, right? You need to own your term for anything else. But then what we've had since then is cut back, scale back. But we've also had since then, Labour have said again that if they get back in, they will again build it back to that original where we started in the first place, right? I want to believe that, but at the same time, and I'm sure a lot of people out there want to believe that, but at the same time, they haven't necessarily had a good example so far. Does that make sense?
Look, I do. And so, a bit of muddle, you can change your mind if you explain why and people understand that.
Yes.
But if you've campaigned and on the basis of, and this is what we see, promises before the election, then not delivering. Look, I think, we back in 2017, we promised we'd try and build 100,000 houses. We still built, I don't know, was it 30 or 40,000? It was still the most houses ever built for a long time, since the 30s. We didn't get there. No. So it wasn't for lack of trying. But I think where you consciously shift the direction of travel and what you're going to do or your aspirations, then that's not delivering. We some might say we failed on that big aspiration, but we moved in the right direction. We didn't get there fast enough. But if you come back to some of what this coalition government has done, they're simply not even attempting to. So come back to the hospital. If the need is clearly shown to be of a certain size and scale, and I'm not getting into the details of what they will be, then that's what we need to build. Of course, we have budget restrictions. Maybe you've got to, push those out. I think one of the core areas, and it's across almost every project in this country, we have to be better at scrutinising. And I think we have big players across the construction sector, across the contracting sector and roading, and they are squeezing government a little bit, and whereas we should be squeezing them.
Yeah. This
government said that they're trying to do that. I'm not. I tend to think that they're giving preference to a few of the bigger players, and it's the small people that are getting squeezed. We've got to give everyone a fair go. If we're going to have a competitive economy, give smaller people a chance as well. Don't just hand it all to the big players.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, do you think you stand a chance next year?
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
and I'll caveat that because I'm concerned as a voter that everyone thinks Labour and the other side are a shoo-in next year.
Yeah, I know.
And I think and are going to go into this kind of thinking something and then going to be surprised by actually it being either National still there, or it being a dance site closer than anyone bloody thought it would be.
I mean, for every logical reason, we should be voted back in, because the direction of travel is not the right direction for New Zealand or the vast majority of New Zealanders. But they in government will have all the levers of power and influence. They will have so much money behind them that we won't be able to compete on the basis of money. So we'll always go out thinking that it's on the basis of justice and reason and common sense and in the long-term outcomes, that we want a fairer, more just, more equitable society for New Zealand over the next 50 years or and beyond. So that should drive people's decision. Look, it's not that simple, and often it's the day-to-day stuff that annoy people. So cost of living, and the government promised they were going to reduce it. We got hit with post-COVID inflation. Yes, prices went up.
Yeah, the world got hit.
Absolutely, it did. And so the National Party and that came in saying we're going to reduce all that. Well, they haven't been able to at all. The costs have continued to go up. A lot because of their own charges. We had the ships not coming to New Zealand. These are the cruise liners, because the charges that the national government has put in place to offset their tax cuts are providing disincentives for these cruise liners to come to New Zealand. That's the reality. And so they've just shifted the costs around. It has affected our economy. Come back to 18 months' time, or it'll be 15 months' time. We will have a formidable government to try and kick out. And, so justice might be on our side, fairness, better future, but it's going to be a battle. So, yes, we do have a good chance, but it is going to require some coordination. And so, we have to show how we can, help reduce the cost of living. It will be hopefully a reform of the electricity sector in some way. It will be jumping on some of the monopolistic players, be it some of the airline behaviour or some of the supermarkets, all of that. So the cost of living is really important. But as I say, if you can't get a decent job that pays you enough, and protects you enough to kind of have an affordable home and a secure home, and when you need it to get some access to healthcare, then it's going to be a pretty sad New Zealand. So that's what we will be campaigning on, to get those core values and opportunities in place.
Fantastic. We've run out of time, and I knew we would, but I want to ask one more question. You must sit through a lot of question time, and I need to ask you this one thing. Has Christopher Luxon ever answered a simple question with a simple answer? Because I've never seen him do it.
No, and I guess that's where some experience and helps. Winston might be alongside him there, but sometimes you get a blunter and clearer answer from Winston than you will from Christopher Luxon.
Thank you very much for joining us, Damien. You just sit there while I just round out the show. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you for tuning in. I've been Richard Knights, and you've all been wonderful. Remember, if you're looking for a robust, respectful adult debate about all things local and further afield, and a welcoming online community doesn't take itself too seriously, come and find What's News Dunedin on Facebook and join our fun. On next week's show, we're talking to Helen Beattie, Managing Director of Veterinarians for Animal Welfare Aotearoa. Look forward to seeing you next Friday at 12 on OAR FM. And if you want to listen to the show again or simply share it with your friends, you can find the podcast at oar.org.nz or even on Spotify or your favourite podcast provider.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.